what would you consider the three most important things in the golf swing? Now, there's a lot of different ways to think about this, and I'll tell you why. Number one, I always like to look at the golf swing in terms of negotiables and non-negotiables. And really, if you dive into the golf swing on its tiniest scale, anything is negotiable to some degree. Like, everybody can get away with doing something more than someone else does it. Because at the end of the day, the swing is about matchups. We talk about this all the time. It's about the combination of elements that can make your swing work together. But every golfer is going to have negotiables or non-negotiables, basically meaning you have to do certain things always to make sure you hit it well, and certain things you can kind of play around with. It's commonly understood that most people think of things like grip, posture, alignment, your stance, all that stuff as fundamentals of the golf swing. I put air quotations on fundamentals because I genuinely do not believe they are fundamental. Anything that you can play around with and still hit a successful shot, to me, is not fundamental to the game of golf at all. What I think of as more fundamental, where I would classify the three more important things in golf, and I would argue there's 4 pillars, but let's say 3 just to simplify it for this argument, would be the club face, your body movement, and the club movement. Those are the 3 for me that are more of what you would consider a non-negotiable if you want to hit good shots. And again, anything in the golf swing is negotiable, but if we did have to put something on the other side that most people do, this is what I would suggest. Why is the club face one of them? Well, club face is king. We always talk about it. If you have an open club face, you're going to do things in the golf swing to try to make sure that you can start the ball online, and that generally will require and create a lot of bad habits in order to make sure you can solve or fix your club face through some form of a band-aid in the golf swing. So club face gets wide open. For me as a right-handed golfer, that pushes my start line to the right. What is that going to do? It's going to add loft. The ball's going to spin in the air. You're not going to compress it. It's going to push to the right, and it's probably slice. You lose a lot of distance. It's a terrible idea. So what are most golfers going to do to try to band-aid the club face? Really, one of two things is what we will most commonly see. The first one will be a lot of flipping at the ball. Even if the club face is open, I can shut it down with my hands at the last second with a lot of timing, and probably more of a better player's reaction. And then the higher handicappers, they're going to spin out over the top, really cover the ball with their chest, and cut across it with some really poor club movement in an effort to try to de-loft it, to compress it more, to start it more online. Now, in theory, you might fix all the issues that the club face created, except you have now created another negative, which is the club movement gets sacrificed. Anytime that you're trying to fix something in your golf swing, you have to think of them as a net positive change. What does that mean, net positive? It means that the sum of all the things that happen in your golf swing when you make a change needs to be positive. It needs to be an improvement. If I fix the club face, but I sacrifice the club movement, is that a net positive? Not really, right? It actually creates some bad habits. So in that situation, we want net positives. Net positives, generally speaking, are going to be when the sum of your results are better. So fixing the club face without sacrificing the club movement is a net positive. Now, that's pillar number 1, club face. You get the club face in a stronger position. You can de-loft it, create more shaft lean, create more ball speed and compression. Generally speaking, this is better for most people. As you start to swing really slow, this could be because of physical limitation, age, whatever the case might be, strength, whatever. As your swing speed slows down, you can afford to deliver more loft because you need spin on the ball to keep the ball in the air. If I swing really slow and I deliver a lot of shaft lean, the ball is going to come out like this and it's going to die out of the sky. Speed creates spin. If I don't swing with a lot of speed, I don't create a lot of spin. I need loft to create more spin. So the slower you are, the less shaft lean and compression you want. The faster you are, the more of that you want, as a rule of thumb. So club face is very important because it affects all these things. It's like all encompassing. So of course, that's one of the most important things in the golf swing. Number 2, let's put them in different order, would be the club movement. If I cut across the ball, any sort of club path issue really that's either too extreme from the outside or too extreme from the inside can create low point issues, contact issues, ball flight issues, too much curvature, poor start line, and everything else. So generally speaking, we typically want to have a tighter framework with the club movement, because if my path gets too far from the inside, I'm going to struggle with a lot of blocks because my start line is going to move really far out to my right. I'm going to struggle with a lot of timing of my hands to get it back online or to curve it back online, and that can lead to hooks if I overdo it. And if I swing too far from the inside, I can have low point issues. Either I'm too shallow because the club movement is dropping too far from the inside and I can hit it heavy or thin because my low point is too far behind the ball, or I shift so far laterally without rotating that the club still drops to the inside and my path still moves really far to the right. As I hit down on the ball more, my path moves right for me as a righty, then creates the same problem. Now my low point's way forward, but still a path complication. So any path to an extreme is no good. If I had to choose, I'll take too far from the inside as opposed to too far from the outside. That's typically more of a commonality with better players. As golfers get worse, you typically do not see that. You'll typically see much more of paths too far from the outside for a worse golfer, paths too far from the inside from a better golfer. But club paths in general, if we can keep it relatively tight, generally speaking, that's a good idea. So just in general, that would be something more along the lines of my preference. And then if we had to pick a third one, what would be the third most important variable in the golf swing? Third most important concept, it would be the body movement. Why the body movement? Because the body movement is also all-encompassing, that affects everything else. If I tilt my chest too far away from my target, my sternum falls behind the ball, I struggle with low point issues. I bottom out early, I deliver too much loft, really hard to hit down on the ball, it creates problems. If my chest spins out of sequence and gets too forward, I couldn't cut across the ball, I'm not rotating very well, I might get too far out in front of it that I can't keep up with my hands, low point can actually get too far forward, I might early release it in reaction to that. Again, we can come up with a million hypotheticals, but too many problems. Generally speaking, your weight shift, your body tilts, we call the pivot all-encompassing because it affects the weight transfer, it affects the tilting of your body, it affects your low point, it affects your path, it affects how the club moves, and it'll affect how much arm structure you're doing at the bottom. So whether that means more release, less release, chicken wing, early release, all of that. A lot of these things are actually, believe it or not, reactions to poor pivots. So club face mechanics, club movement mechanics, and the pivot, in my opinion, are the three, let's call them non-negotiables for most players. If you fix those three things, you'll fix 80% of problems with golfers. If I get stuck in a situation where I'm, those three things are in really good places and I'm still hitting it poorly, then you can look at, isolated movements, arm structure patterns, wrist angles, all of that. You can look more specifically at ball position, alignment with your feet. Am I aiming too far right when I get to the golf course? I'm aiming too far left. Is my ball position too far forward or back? Is my grip getting too strong or too weak? Is it changing when I'm setting up to the club? People think about tension in the golf swing. How tight am I holding the club? I don't really think that's that important, to be honest. So if there's anything I could tell you here, and it's not to discourage you, it's just to get you thinking a little bit differently. The three most important things in the golf swing for me, generally speaking, are the pillars that affect everything. Those pillars can fall into those categories. Wrist angles to me is not a pillar. It's something that affects the club movement. It's something that affects the club face. It's something that affects our release pattern. But really, I can try to manipulate my wrist angles themselves, but still struggle with the game of golf because there's so many other things, so many other factors involved. So it would be considered more of like a subcategory. The grip is a subcategory. The alignment of my feet is a subcategory. These are negotiables. I can get away with a lot of different patterns and make it work. But if my path gets too extreme one way or the other, I'm going to struggle. If my pivot is really poor, I'm going to struggle. Reverse pivoting or whatever. Like, there's a million different hypothetical problems I can create with a poor pivot. So for me, those would be the three things that I would consider more important in the golf swing than anything else.